About 20 years ago, I made some DVDs about waxbills. These are some of the things that I did. Uh, this is my bookshelf, the books I had on it. Today I thought I'm going to try and put some things together. It won't be very good visually because I'm not very good at technical stuff, but I'm going to try and get some points across that might help some that don't believe in what's happening today. This is how I used to keep my birds in like sheds like this and aviaries, and but we've come a long way since then, and it's not my speciality, but today's breeders are doing marvellous stuff with some of their birds. But I always kept the well, perhaps not easy ones, but ones that just that I liked. This is another one. They both appeared on my earlier DVDs, and you know, 20 odd years on from that, I'm going to try and get some points across. It won't be very good visually, but there's some things I want to get across, because I'm not altogether sure we've done too well with since the import ban came. This is another one, and this one was attached to what you've just seen outside. This is another one, and you see there's a big aviary to the left of it, and all their window frames, they're all removable, so you can move them in bad weather. And this gives them more protection from when I first started 50 years ago, and they used to tell us we could keep them in open aviaries, and these birds would survive winter. Well, I don't believe that one. They come from Africa for a warmer area, and they don't like our climate. It's cold and damp, and if you don't protect them in some way, then you may suffer losses. Later on, after I've done well in these things, and I got to cage breeding. Now, there's a lot of people just don't like cage breeding, and they don't like fostering, but I'll go over that point in a bit, and I'll try and get my points of view across. A lot of people won't agree with it, but it always worked for me. This were it from the top. As you can see, they're all protected. So no, I did have quite a lot of bird rooms and aviaries, so I did have a lot of birds. Over the years, I had all sorts of birds. I had zebra finches, bengalese, and all different ones, and eventually I settled down to just waxbills. But I did what they call the common ones. They were cheap at the time, and though easy's not the right word, they certainly weren't difficult. This is again, it's out of my old DVDs. This one. What this is, it's just a couple of young bengalese in a nest, and although you can't see it, they're being fed by zebra finches. I'll go on to fostering at some point, and this is a thing I used to do quite a lot. If any chicks were born, then I was going to do everything I could to save them. One of my favourite birds is bengalese. They're such sociable little things and friendly. Over the years, I had quite a few of them. I used them, you know, mainly for when things went wrong, and I would have them on standby. I'd have a nest box ready, I'd have dummy eggs in, and if anything went wrong or I suspected something were going to go wrong, I would look to the bengalese. Another thing about them is I never used to disturb my waxbills at night. I used to keep away. so I never really knew how long they brooded for and things like this. But if you, another thing about fostering is your Bengalese go into the cage, into the box every night, so they're going to keep them little chicks warm. So there's so much more to be learnt about fostering, and I say I will go over it at some point. And you know, it's just, they're not perhaps much to look at, but they're a marvellous little bird. And you know, initially I used to think, do they need mealworms and live food to feed them? But they don't. They feed the chicks with whatever they want. So it's, but you can get them to do all sorts of things if you want to. This is an example of what some of the things I used to do. This this blue cap and its mate, they were a pair of young birds, and they weren't feeding the chicks properly. They didn't look after them. So what I did, I put Bengalese chicks into their nest, because Bengalese push to be fed. And what I did, I put their chicks after this into a Bengalese nest. And what happened is, these fed the Bengalese, and the Bengalese reared the blue caps. So it worked for me, and I did lots and lots of things like that. But as you can see, you can do all sorts with fostering if you really want to do it. I will go over it. There's a lot of good things coming from it, but there's a lot of people against it, and I want to try and put that straight if I can. This is the Bengalese nest. You can see it's in a cage, and you can see the young blue caps in there. And these are the two that were raised. This is another species I kept, Gouldians. Lovely, lovely birds. 50 years ago when I first went into birds, you never saw these things. But now, thanks to the breeders of Australian finches, they breed like rabbits. You know, they take a bit of a while to come through and get the colouring, but they breed like rabbits, and they breed in small cages. And one of the things I want to try and get across is that over the years, I did all sorts of things, as did a lot of people, and we worked out that we could get some of our waxbills breeding in cages. This was one of the species I kept, along with orange cheeks, gold breasts, blue caps, and red cheek cordon blues. They just, you know, they're all regular breeders. They're not difficult. They don't have aggressive tendencies, and they suited me. You know, such things as violet ears and purple grenadiers are very popular, and they're very good in a way in which they'll go to nest readily. They'll sit tight, they'll not bother when you're around, whereas these, like the gold breasts and stuff like that, they're nervous. Orange cheeks, they'll come off the nest when you're about. So, but they're not for me. They have bad behavioural problems. And in the last, you know, 10-15 years, since we learnt from the Continentals, a lot of our top breeders are now breeding violet ears and grenadiers and all that sort of thing without too much difficulty. In the past, I think we were giving them too much live food and overstimulating them, and they were tending to want to fight more than breed. But I say, they're not for me at all. This is another one. This is one of my favourites, red cheek cordon blues. For me, the red cheek cordon blue and the blue cap waxbill are our two species that we should have got established, because they're very, very prolific breeders, and you know, at times you fall on stopping them. But you know, they don't perhaps breed in small cages like, say, the Gouldians will, but you give them a bit more space, and they can be very prolific. They were always the dominant species in the ones I kept, so I bred more of these and blue caps than I did, say, common firefinches, gold breasts and orange cheeks. I used to use a lot of live food in the past, but later on I realised they didn't need it, and I went towards what towards what the Continentals did and buy stuff from frozen, and that worked just as well. And you don't get the aggressive tendencies like you would with overstimulating them. This bird don't look great. It's a little orange cheek. It sort of feather plucked when it come out of the nest, but it were a really good little breeder. And orange cheeks are one of my favourite birds. I don't know a lot about all species, mainly about the species that I kept myself. And I spent years trying to overcome things as regards breeding orange cheeks. One chap said you could breed them in a colony. Well, I tried this in this aviary here, and all I got were continuous intimidation from each pair to another. So the better way is keep a pair on their own. If I kept them in a collection with other dominant birds, then they didn't do so well. But in their own cages, they can be pretty good breeders. This is a nest here. There's a little bit at the top, and birds just kept coming and intimidating all the time this little pair until they left the nest and deserted it. So my advice would be, don't try these in a colony. They're not a colony species. This is a nest of orange cheeks. It's because they're nervous. They don't like you to be about, and they're very secretive. But this were about 2'6" square, as is this one, and they bred quite well, as did the cordon blues in such things. This is a nest of orange cheeks. It's also in a cage that might feature again. I had gold breast fostered in this cage as well. What had happened was the parent birds wouldn't stop breeding. They were quite prolific. They had 3 rounds, and so I stopped them, took the eggs off them, and I put them into this nest. As you can see, they're growing now, and they all reach maturity. It's another thing fostered. You know, it's just something you can do. If your birds have done too much, you can take their eggs away and foster them, or you could just let them die. As you see, they're nearly ready for fledging shortly. They are lovely little things. It's one of my favourite birds. They're very active. It is a bit later on. They've come out the nest, and as you can see, they're with the foster parents. But there's a little bit here. As you can see, this bengalese is feeding a blue cap. In this little bit, this pair of bengalese were hand reared, and I could do anything with them. I could put a nest box in, they'd go and sit in it. I could put chicks or eggs in, they'd go and sit on them. They were a really marvellous pair of birds. I didn't do a lot of filming indoors because the lighting were bad, and you always get wires in the way. So I filmed mainly in the outdoors, but I did do quite well in cages, especially when the weather were either too warm or too cold. Most of what we saw earlier, what went onto me DVDs and videos. If you're into these sort of things and you've come into Waxbills in last 20 years, you've never seen them, I'm sure somebody could make you copies. They might just be worth having a look at for you. These are gold breasts, lovely little birds, very small though. This is black crowned waxbills. It's a species I never knew much about. I was given some by a friend, and I initially bred some in an aviary, and later I threw them as a colony, and they just kept breeding and breeding. And what I did each year, and I had them a couple of years, I used to go to friends and I would exchange to get new blood. So these will feature a little bit. This is while I'm still in Thorn and before I've left for Hull. I didn't ever really know a great deal about them. You know, it was just that I threw them all together and in an aviary, and they kept breeding. In a bit you'll see quite a few of them, but when I had to move I stopped filming. But at the end of the year there were around 60 black crown waxbills in this colony. Nothing to do with me, they just got on breeding and did it all on their own. They are lovely birds though. The only thing I found with them were a problem with feather plucking. Now I don't know why it happened. I asked Mr. Paul Donnell, and he thought it was the dominant bird that was doing it, and that was the only thing. Other than that, I never had to foster them. They bred like rabbits really on their own, and it had nothing to do with me. This is some of the colony. They seem to be everywhere, and at the end of the year that they really were everywhere. But I was ready to move and I'd stopped filming. That's a little nest there of one of them. It is quite a big aviary, that one. As you can see, there's quite a lot of them there. There were nests everywhere. I even think there may have been some of the birds that were helping to feed other birds, but it's not something I could ever prove. But as I say, it's a species I never really tried with because they did everything themselves. But what I did learn about them was these are a colony species. They're nice together. They're happy together. Whereas an orange cheek, I had orange cheeks in here. I think it was 3 or 4 pairs one year, and all they did was squabble. But these birds, they just kept breeding all the time. As you can see, there's plenty of them. And you see, odd one or two, there's a feather plucked, and that was the downside of keeping them over winter. They'd all be together, and this is what happened after you bring them out again. I just never found the answer to stopping that. This is the aviaries again, and the garden. I did have a lot of aviaries and a lot of birds. This is a cage we saw earlier where the orange cheeks were being fostered. But I used to do experiments now, working through years to try and get these birds to breed in cages. So what I did, you know, if you breed, you foster, then this is the natural environment where they are. And now these birds are breeding in that same small cage where some others were fostered. I just love orange cheeks, lovely little things. But it were a species that were a submissive species. The others were more dominant, and if I'd got them in a group, then they'd be intimidating. They'd be intimidated by the other birds in it. This is one of my other favourites, blue-cap waxbills. There's no reason whatsoever that people can't breed these birds at all. In fact, I must say, if you're not breeding them, you're doing something wrong, because they want to breed, and provided they're of a right age, they are very prolific breeders. They'll breed in aviaries, they'll breed in cages, anything, and they don't even need the amount of live food that they used to have. This is when I'm getting ready to leave this little bit here. I had to start taking all my aviaries down, and that's why I never filmed a big colony at the end. It's the same cage you saw earlier fostered, but that's the bit in the top corner where they were. Red cheek cordon blues, yeah, easy to breed. You know, we're trying to, since the import ban, we're trying to establish everything, but really, there were never any chance that it were going to happen. And these are the birds that we should be establishing, because there's no reason. They're really prolific breeders when you give them the right environment. They're easy to sex, as you can see. This here young cock is already got his colours coming through, but you can sex them in most cases as soon as they've left the nest, because the cocks have more blue from wing to chest area. This here is a pair of blue-breasted waxbills. Just before I had to leave, I was trying a few different birds, and this was one of them I really wanted to have a go with, but I never got anywhere. I had to leave before I got going. Another one were venacious fire finches. I wanted to have a go with them, but say again, I had to move, and that finished. Here again, a common fire finch. These are my favourite birds. I like colouring birds, and these were colours. The behaviour were good, and you know, they just suited me. As the little orange cheeks, as they get older, they're going to a molt at about 2 weeks old, and you can see the bill colour changing. Just, to me, they're just lovely little birds. I love the behaviour. The only thing about them is they're nervous, and this is where you know, if you're breeding them, you tend to leave them alone and let them get on with things. As you can see, all the wires on here, they're a bit of a nuisance, and that's why I didn't do a lot of filming indoors. There were no real need to breed a lot of birds before the import ban. I just used to do my own thing and carry out experiments and all this sort of stuff. You know, it's you couldn't get anything. People used to want to buy these things off me for £5. Well, if you're up to date, you know how much these cost now. So I know quite a bit about these birds, but not a lot about some of the others. Just basically what friends have told me. From what I can gather from friends, these birds are around about a couple of £100 each now, and they're harder to find. Well, you know, they're easy to parent rear. You could foster. In fact, what I would do, I mean, I say a lot of people are against fostering, but if I paid a lot of money for a pair of birds, I never did it in the past, but these days I think I'd take the first clutch off them and get them under bengalese, so to be sure that I've got some chicks for my investment, and then let them have a go with the next one. The thing about these birds, the bill colour changes as they come into condition. If it's dull, you know, they're not ready, but get them ready, get them in a right environment, and watch them go. You know, I mean, I can't go over everything about the behaviour, but you can tell from the behaviour, you can tell from, you know, what they're doing, exactly where they are. You never need to do a nest inspection, because the thing is, if you do a nest inspection and the chicks are anywhere near leaving, they'll fly straight out. You don't need to do it. You can watch what's happening with the parents. You can see when the chicks have hatched, they're excited, they're jumping about, they start looking for food, and they'll be calling out to like in my calling to me, get out my shed and leave us alone, we're busy. But there's an eagerness for them to get down, get that food and get back to the chicks. these will be young birds. They're not wrong, so they're just. In fact, I don't even know why they're having mealworms. It's maybe with the parents, and the parents have got chicks again. But in those days, I believed in that, and it all worked for me. But if you give these sort of things to the aggressive species, they get aggressive, they attack the mate, and they can even kill them. So they were never going to be for me, them sort of birds. Perhaps the only one that I would have liked to have a go with, Peter's twin spots, because I like the colours. But again, I know nothing about them really, other than you know, they can be little so and so. So I would go to breeders. I would get every bit of information I could before I ever went onto a species like that. But the blue waxbills that I kept, there were never any bother. And any bird that I did get that showed any aggression would soon be gone. Again, these are the blue-breasted, which I'd got hold of. I really fancied having a go with these. I thought, I know I can breed these things if only I can get them going, but you know, I've just never got the chance. You can see from this the different colour of that bill to the blue caps that we saw. And I wonder sometimes if these birds were coming in with a shipment and the dealers didn't know what they'd got, and they were being sold as cordon blues. This is in the big aviary again, and this is a nest that's a black crown's nest. So the nests were everywhere, but this would just happen to be one that I could see. Usually they're in cover, you can't see what's happening, but this were there and I could see it. And the thing about this, you perhaps see as I go along, the mess that builds up on the front of the nest over this period, and you think, how the hell do the parents get in? But there they are in there, black crown waxbills. I don't know if that's a chick. It was something I was doing at the time. This is just a tape that I found after about 14 years. I've not seen this, so I don't really know what I was doing at the time. In some instance, I'm just having to guess. Here again is that same nest you've just seen, and as you can see, the mess is building up at the front, and that's another reason you wouldn't need to inspect the nest. You can see that, so you know everything's all right, and they're doing the job. I used to have a lot of cover at this time. I'd have ivy, and I'd put conifers in, but conifers go brittle and brown after so long, and they look a mess. But when I moved to hull, you'll see in a bit, but that I weren't using live food, and I weren't using cover, and you know, I was making a bit of progress. As you can see, all the green conifer has gone brown now. It's brittle and it looks quite horrible. But in those days, this is what we thought you needed for nervous birds, you know. But they do get quite nervous when they're in an aviary, and I always had an aviary, even though I did breed in cages. I said there's people against fostering, there's people against breeding in cages, but I'm going to try and get some points across that might change people's mind.